All right, we are recording. Welcome to the Boulder Junction Access District Parking and Travel Demand Management Joint Commission meeting. It is July 23rd, 2025, and I will call the roll. Kevin Knapp is not here. Robin Ronan.
I'm here, present.
Daniel Eisenman.
Present.
Rebecca Dumichel.
Present.
Kevin Kraus is not here yet. I will now turn the meeting over to Chairs Ronan and Dumichel for procedural matters.
Robin, do you want to lead today? But I have one thing before we get started, even though we're recording already. Daniel, it's my first time meeting you because I was not at the May meeting, so it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Thank you.
Was that your only point, Rebecca?
Before we get to official business.
Yes, before official business. Was that your point? Sorry. Yes.
Yes. I was just saying hello.
Thank you. In that case, I'll go ahead and start. We're going to start with procedural items, starting with the approval of the May 2025 meeting minutes. Do we have any corrections or notes to the meeting minutes?
I don't believe we have a quorum for either board for that because I wasn't there for that meeting.
Okay, I don't think we can either.
We have a quorum for parking right now.
We have a quorum for parking, but we don't have one.
Yes, but I'm one of the members of parking and I was not present, so therefore I cannot ascertain whether or not it's correct.
In that case, I don't think we can vote on it. I also don't think we can do the second point, which is elections for chair and vice chair of BJAD TDM, because we don't have a quorum.
That's correct.
Okay. In that case, I will, I believe I'm looking, and please correct me if I'm wrong, at the revised matters from staff, which is the final draft of 2026 budget proposal from Scott.
Yep, that'll be me.
In that case.
We didn't approve the change to the agenda. Sorry to interrupt real quick. That reflects what you're saying, that we would love to just switch things around so that matters from staff appears after number 2.
Okay.
And so if we could just get a quick vote to approve an amended agenda before we proceed.
Sure. Rebecca?
I move to approve the amended agenda.
Second?
Thank you.
Okay. In that case, agenda item 3, matters from staff. Chris, would you like to proceed?
I would, thank you. If y'all wouldn't mind giving me a sec to get set up here with my presentation. Sorry, one sec, please. Okay, can everyone see that slide?
Yes, you can see it. Oh, now we're back on your, yeah, there we go.
You're good, right? Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Chris Scott, and I am the budget analyst for Community Vitality. Typically, Elliot Labonte would be the one handling this presentation, but he is out on a well-deserved vacation. So I am stepping in to help out the best I can to provide you all with some information on our 2026 budget submission. So before I begin, I will ask if folks could hold any questions or comments just until the end of the presentation. And one thing to note, I will just say I'm just here filling in for Elliot. There may be some questions that you all have that I may be unable to answer. So if that's the case, Elliot has assured me that, that she could take down some questions and notes, and we'll make sure to get those to Elliot for some responses. So with that being said, I'm gonna jump right in. So the purpose of this presentation today is to give you all an update on the budget process for 2026 for Community Vitality. While of course you all focus on the 2 BJAD funds, and I'm sure Elliot gives you updates on fund financials, the purpose of this presentation today is really just to give you a pretty high-level overview of Community Vitality's budget submission as a whole, rather than just a focus on just either BJAD, but I will bring up some BJAD related items in this presentation. So where are we in the budget process? We are at the point where CV has submitted its proposals to the central budget team, who is now reviewing. And as part of that process, next is the executive budget team meetings. So what is EBT and who is it composed of? So EBT is composed of the city manager's office, the city manager, as well as HR and communications, as well as some floating department directors that go around each year. Also our central budget team as well. So they look at the proposals across the organization, they see how they align with the city's priorities, and then our meetings for Community Vitality are scheduled next week. And in those meetings, the EBT will come with questions for us about the proposals. There'll be some back and forth. And afterwards, the city manager's office will provide us with its budget recommendations. And finally, we'll come back to you all probably around September to determine support on the budget specifically for the 2 BJADs. And then finally comes the city council vote on the final budget, which comes in late October. So what's changed? Our operating budget will decrease by around 9%. And this is mainly, actually totally due to the move of our parking enforcement team to planning and development services. So their entire program is being moved. However, operations will remain entirely the same. The purpose of that move is to bring all enforcement planning services kind of together under one roof. So the biggest increase from our budget is coming from our capital budget. This is mainly due to increasing costs from our larger garage renovation effort, primarily in CAGED, that is tackling a lot of deferred maintenance and really ensuring that our garages are safe and accessible to community members and visitors alike. Now in our current CIP, most of this increase is coming from CAGED, like I mentioned, but some is coming from BJAD, and I'll get into more specifics in the next slide, specifically BJAD parking. So we are asking for $300,000 in 2026 for the electronic signage updates in BJAD, coming from BJAD parking. And then beyond that, we are asking for $500,000 over the course of 5 years, starting in 2027, for capital improvements in BJAD. And the purpose of those dollars is to continue to provide general capital enhancements, maintenance, and wayfinding in BJAD. And that also is coming from parking. So just a little bit more detail around our major CIP changes and projects that are coming up. So like I said, the bulk of our CIP is coming from our CMGC, meaning Construction Management General Contractor project, for our CAGED parking garages. So that's anticipated to be $25 million over 6 years. Most of that investment is going to go into the 1500 Pearl and Spruce garages. However, of course, we're also investing in St. Julian, RTD, and Randolph garages. This year, we were also awarded a grant by DRCOG, another acronym, Denver Regional Council of Governments, to investigate how to implement mobility hubs in our garages. We're asking for $3 million over 3 years from 2027 to 2030 to account for that potential implementation, or not potential, but implementation. Next, the Pearl Street Mall's 50th anniversary is coming up. And as part of that, we're looking at $3 million next year, and that's split. So it's $2 million from our CAGED fund and $1 million from CCRS. This was part of our budget submission last year for the 2025 to 2030 CIP. And those funds will be appropriated to us next year to help us get ready for the anniversary. The intention for the dollars is not really any big, capital changes on the mall. I'm sure Matt can talk more about that if you have questions, but really just for refreshing it and making it look really nice for the anniversary. On the hill, there's still a surface parking lot that is solely for transient parking, although we have launched a new permit option for long-term parking. The CIP dollars we're asking for there are intended to help improve the lot. And then in addition, for our normal CCRS funding, we have 800,000 in public art projects. And then finally, the BJAD digital signs. I don't have a whole lot of details on the project itself. I'll direct you to, Elliot, or I believe Regan Brown for more specifics, but we have asked for 300,000 for next year in our 2026 to 2031 CIP for those digital signs from BJAD parking. So just some notable items for you all that I think could act as kind of a guiding light for both our budget submission and your support. So even though across the organization we have been talking about budget reductions, we want to make clear that we are not changing any of our essential services. Our other guiding principle is that we want to address deferred maintenance in all of our district assets. And this is really important to us. This will make sure that we will promote safety and access, especially as we increase our special events in the city and more people utilize those assets. So what's next? Next week, EBT will be meeting with departments, including us. August 29th is City Council's kind of first look at the budget, first review. The next step will be review by commissions like yourself in September to determine support. And then we'll bring that info back to City Council for the final budget vote. And adoption of the budget will be in by the end of October. So I'm going to wrap up here and just open it up to any questions or feedback. Like I said, I will say I am just standing in here for Elliot. If I'm unsure of a response, we'll make sure to write your question down and have Elliot review when he's back on from vacation. So thank you.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One is, can you describe the capital improvements to the downtown garages? What all is involved in that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christine could probably, yeah.
The process that we've been going through is we've been bringing the third party engineering firm to look at security and structural, MEP, all that good stuff in all of the garages. We're primarily trying to focus on one garage at a time because we don't want to shut down all the garages all at one time and make a big old mess of the city. So we're starting with the Spruce Garage, which is our highest utilized garage. They've gone through and done assessments of the things that we need to focus on. We're looking at the budget and then bringing together the maintenance team will be responsible for maintaining the garages after the construction is done, and the leadership, as well as the downtown management commission, and prioritizing the work that needs to be done. Because I'm sure, as you know, when it comes to managing facilities, there's always more work that you want to do than there's usually budget for. So prioritizing the work. We had to do some emergent work this past spring at the southeast corner and the southwest corner and the northern side, and right along the elevator curbs and the stairwells needed some TLC, so that was done this spring. But in reality, we have to go back through. We don't have as-built drawings of those garages, so we have to get the as-bills done. Then we're in the process of going to DD, so then we're going to figuring out what the design is of the items that we want to do. And then we will go to permitting, and we all know that concrete, we don't all know. Concrete needs to be poured when it's 50 degrees and rising, otherwise it doesn't cure properly. So we're looking at construction at the Spruce Garage in the spring of 2026. At the same time, we're also doing this work at the St. Julian. The St. Julian is trying to do an expansion project as well. And it's a 4-star hotel that we share walls with in that garage. So it turns out concrete work is very, very loud, and they don't like it when we close down or we disrupt their people who are coming to visit tourists to town. So we're trying to thread the needle of aligning our CMGC work along with their development, so that when they're being loud and pouring concrete in the building, we are also doing it at the same time. So those are the two projects that we're trying to do in 2026. That's when it seems like the St. Julian's project will be trending, and we're working really closely with them on that. And then we're hoping to do
the same thing, you're at 1,500 Pearl in 2027. So we're going through the procurement process and doing all of the assessments now.
And second question, the need for digital signage at BJet. Is that a want or a need?
That is a good question. So based on our last meeting, that we discussed here, talking about ways to encourage people off of the streets, help them find their way to the garage. In BJAD, it seems like the wayfinding, when we installed these light up, called them lollipop signs at all of our garages, it's really helped tourists and people coming to town identify where the garages are and be able to get to the garages. So I would say, is it a want or a need? Is the world gonna stop turning without them? No, but based on the conversation that this group had 2 months ago, or whenever it was in that last, it seemed like there was a lot of interest in that one. So.
Is it I remember like jet area, the garage is like under parked as of today, but was that just the RTD portion or is it the garage as a whole?
The whole garage.
Okay, and so, but what you're saying, the signs aren't so much needed to signal to people that there is capacity, they're just, they don't go find the garage.
People can find the garage.
Okay,
So, but it's not like a sort of a space count system and lights above.
that's like capacity.
We do have those space counters here in some of our garages. It is not always perfect system, so we can decide if that's what we want to install in your area. Or if we just want to do the light up signs where people can see like parking this way. Because right now, if you look at the signs around the garage, it's really easy to miss the signage to the garages, which is really big.
That's why I understand those monies are coming from BJet, right?
Yes.
From this fund.
Yeah.
And we can determine whether that's the best use of that, right? Or if we actually need to spend for 300,000, it could be 2 signs for 100,000 kind of thing. Potential, right?
Yeah, and one of them, we've determined, part of the complication with those signs is that there isn't currently, especially on the Pearl side, because there are 2 entrances into the garage.
Yeah.
The Pearl side does not have access to electricity right there, that is owned by the garage. And so it wouldn't just be the sign. One of the signs, the one that's comes in, you're driving in from Pearl, driving west, you only need a single sign, or a single-sided sign, so it would be less expensive. The one inside of the BJED area should be double-sided because people can come from either direction. However, the complication is going to be getting electricity out to those spots.
I have additional questions about the signs.
Sure.
Sorry. There's a little bit of a benefit bias to being in the room versus those of us that are virtual right now. So apologies for just stepping up here. On those signs, and I can give a little bit more background, Daniel, on the fact that drivers do have a hard time finding their way into the garage, and they do circle the neighborhood. And the temporary signs that are weighted on the street, they get blown over or knocked down by wind and things like that. Just drivers are very confused while they're going through the pedestrian plaza there. Apologies if you have been through the district recently or several times or even lived there. I don't know your background on that. I can just give you my experience on that. Because there's a budget item here, do we actually have a quote on this that we have spec'd out what these signs look like? That is my first question.
No, the problem with this is, it has to even really be approved for us to go through the process of speccing it all out. So this is a finger in the wind generally based on what it costs to install, the signs around BJED. If the money is not at least set aside in the budget next year, we won't be able to spend it if we decide to move forward with it. But you can move forward with, or you can decide to not move forward with it, even if it is budget. So it's a placeholder for now.
Okay,
If I could-
and then-
Sorry, Rebecca, if you don't mind, if I could address the second part of that question about the decision points on budget is you in your advisory role can definitely tell us good advice on how to, what to look for and how to work on the next steps, but in the budget process for city council as the board of directors to approve the CIP budget, there's also a chance for you to interact on giving your advice to city council. And so that'll be in those steps that Chris Scott laid out in the future steps, probably at the September meeting. So we'll keep you informed about opportunities for you to weigh in on the budget specifically.
And I'll say that I'm relatively new to the city. I've been through the budget process twice, 3 times at this point. And I'm always amazed that we have to start thinking about next year's budget in April. So we have to think about any possible thing that we might want. We have to build it for the budget now. And we can kind of chisel our way through what we actually want as we get closer and have more eyes on or clearer vision of what might happen in the coming year, but we have to at least ask for it now.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you. I guess my other question on the signs is that there's been an assumption made that it will be digital. And as we get through whatever process of speccing this out, what size would that be? What kind of light pollution might that be at night? For neighboring, hotel guests and residents, all of those things might be part of that request for information when that comes up.
Yep.
Okay.
Is there more? That was good with the questions.
And,
I-
I do have one more question. This is the only project BJAD is gonna be doing this year.
I think that's the one biggish project that is on today's budget. I don't know, we'll have to double check that with either Chris or Elliot. Chris Scott, do you know if there's anything else in BJAD?
No, as far as I know, that is the only submission that we had for BJAD. I do know that I believe in previous years we had asked for $100,000 a year in CIP for BJAD improvements. We are not asking for that this year, and it is kind of part of this bigger project. So the additional $100,000 that I mentioned over the course of the next 5 years will be, I think, for those other purposes I laid out of general improvements, enhancements, maintenance, etc.
I will mention it's not in our budget because it's a responsibility of the ownership association, but there are repairs to bollards and lampposts associated with the construction. So when that construction is complete, that work will go on, but it's not the GIP's responsibility. So you may see some other work going on.
All right, Chris, I wanted to clarify. I thought at the beginning of your presentation that you said it would be 500,000 over 5 years.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so it's 100,000 per year then. And
100,000
then
per year, yeah.
do you have an actual more details on what those capital improvements might be? Especially if the wayfinding is happening outside in this other, pool of money for signs.
Yeah, I don't have any specifics about it. I know that as part of our proposal, when we ask for these dollars, it's a general ask for district capital enhancements, maintenance, and wayfinding. I'll leave it to maybe Christine or Matt if they have any additional details about specifics on those.
We're going to have to follow up with you to get that info.
Okay, and then as the part of the CIP budget, is that in addition to budget dollars that come from BJAD, or is that just aligning BJAD dollars that are in reserves today for items?
So I will say it's not technically from any reserve. We are using, just our general fund balance and our overview of the fund financial to make the determination of using these dollars. So yeah, they are kind of part of the one big bucket of BJAD parking specifically.
Okay, so this $100,000 per year, even though it's factored into this one lump sum here, would come from BJAD parkings.
Correct.
Budget.
Yeah, and it'll come from each year, basically.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And then one final question about budget. That is, I think the city is going to face possibly shortfalls or funding changes due to many reasons right now. And yet this budget overall for all the districts is not going down. what consideration was given to reduce or delay expenses in any of the CIP areas?
Sure. I don't know, Christine or Matt, if you want to chime in first, I'm happy to provide any more details on that if you need me to.
Yeah, that may be something too that we can detail in a follow-up. I will say generally, every city department is looking at reductions, and with the districts, it has a little bit of nuance. So we are preparing concepts for reductions. And actually next week is when we have our first conversations about that. So right now I don't have anything to say about what this specifically might be, because there's going to have to be a negotiation at the staff level to understand what the staff proposal is. So we can follow up with that, and certainly before the next meeting, but as our as these things become finalized, we'll get them out for your information for those now.
Thank you, Matt.
So what's the income of that garage a year?
Ooh. Chris, do you know what the income is of that garage?
Yeah, so do you mean income for like both the permits and short-term parking kind of?
Sure, yeah, short-term parking, the one that.
Sure. So if I look at it now.
Without the permits are the same, just.
While you're looking it up, there's context too to the signage and the revenue, because if, as we expect, our resume service there, that changes the equation for revenue use. So we're going to tell you things that are going to change almost immediately. That's where I was going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, you're specifically talking about the jet garage.
Yes.
And short-term parking.
Yeah.
So, so sorry to butt in. So as far as I can tell from our financials, we anticipated about 90,000 in revenue from the parking garages in permits and fees. So that was our estimate for this year. I don't have specifics on like kind of targets of where we're at for this year, because we just haven't caught up on our revenues for the garage, but that's basically what we anticipated.
It just dawns on me that the revenues are minimal, $90,000, it's almost nothing. And then we're gonna spend on signage, but then most likely people are not parking there because it costs money. I'd rather, would it be possible to subsidize parking for a while and bring people to the district and encourage people to use the RTD for a while things get going, rather than adding to a project that's just gonna cost money, more money than it costs to bring people?
I would say that you are certainly, as a group, welcome to make proposals like that we can investigate. The challenge this year is in a situation where we're looking at citywide reductions, $90,000 means something, right? And so.
But I'm saying, instead of spending $300,000, we
Yeah.
can subsidize it, so we don't kill the 90,000, we just subsidize the 90,000 and start encouraging people to come to the district, start encouraging people to use the RTD garage and transport. And then January comes, or March, or whenever we believe makes sense, then we start charging parking again. You just gotta bring people into the district, it's not being used.
So, that's not the expert, so stop me, please stop me. But, yeah, totally. Like, if that's the will of the commissions to, like, for us to investigate that, that's something we can do. I would say the revenue projections and our plans are really on year cycles. So to do a short-term change right now is a big lift that we have to, like, really consider throwing switches on and off on.
Well, then follow your year cycle, it's fine, it's just
Yeah.
encouraging people to be.
Yeah, 100%.
Otherwise, the barrier to entry is hard already. Right.
Daniel,
Yeah.
sorry, can I provide some background, please? Again, as somebody who's from the district, the issue is not one of cost, because all street parking in the neighborhood is also pay to park. So that's not the issue. It is actually wayfinding. As far as subsidizing, the parking. First of all, if you're an RTD user, you already get a certain number of hours free to park there. We are getting RTD bus service back this year, which is great. A lot of the parking there is actually leased out to employers, so employers are paying for that parking. Again, the cost is not the barrier to using the garage. It is absolutely finding your way through the pedestrian plaza and knowing to turn around the Depot Square restaurant and into something that looks like it is a utility entrance, right? Versus park here. So it's not a matter of you know, paying for other people to park there. The other thing I will say is that, you know, as far as fund performance goes, we do have reserves there. I wouldn't say that, you know, this would necessarily be like we're spending money that we don't have. We have this Monday. Property owners, like my neighbors, have been paying a 10 mil levy just to live in the district. And we have not been spending that money on anything. Now, my neighbors would prefer to have their taxes back instead of spending it on wayfinding, but there's also a quality of life perspective here, which is that when we have lots of people coming into the district in their cars, that is against the transit-oriented focus of this neighborhood, especially if we have people like circling the block, looking for spots on the street. So we do want to encourage them to find the parking that they need right after that they've exited off of Pearl Street.
Yeah, I mean, completely understand, the wayfinding is a real thing, don't get me wrong, it's a real thing, I've felt it through, driven around. I am just wildly concerned that the district is not thriving because there's no people there. And what is it that we're doing to bring people to the district? That's the overarching question. Maybe signage will help a little bit, but it's really not solving for the thing that's actually going to create tax revenue that pays for these things and for people to say, hey, this is all worth it, right? So just like to invite us to start thinking about how do we bring people to the district?
Daniel, can I ask what your metrics for success of what thriving means to you?
Thriving is just storefronts that are leased and sales tax, right? That would be a metric of success. We have a lot of,
Okay.
there's a lot of vacancy in the storefronts. So that would be a metric for success.
I would say, I mean, like, to your point, and I take both of your points. My experience on this commission has been that there are a lot of factors. There are a variety of factors that lead to the lack of utilization. As somebody who, you know, has spent a lot of time in that area and in that district, it is extremely hard to find your place. And when I go over there, which I actually do quite a bit to pick people up from hotels and spots for work, it's like really confusing. I can tell you, just as a, like, I usually bike everywhere in town, but I do drive there to get people, and I find it extremely difficult to know sometimes where to park. And since we are talking about multi-area, like, I'm sorry, having problems speaking today. It's like, because we're talking about different pricing structures involving street pricing and everything else, I hear everything Rebecca's saying on that. I appreciate where you're coming from on the other aspect. I do think it's important that we focus on things that are within the purview of the advisory commission on this particular thing. But also, when I see BJAD and then I compare it to places like downtown, I actually don't know how relatively problematic some of the storefront is doing relative to the rest of Boulder. And that's actually just something I would like to know, like, numbers wise. I don't know, because like when I go down to Pearl Street, it seems like there's a lot of storefronts closed there as well. So I guess if we're gonna make those decisions or like making recommendations and we're doing it based upon things like storefront closures, having a comparison would be helpful. But I take your point, and I appreciate both of your perspectives on it.
I can tell you, we own a whole block in downtown Boulder and it's doing really well. Downtown is doing very, very well. Street storefronts closing in downtown, it has to do with just businesses closing in natural cycle, but BJAD has a serious storefront problem. It's just not leased. It's been vacant for 2 years now. And it's not bringing people, so I think that metric is very interesting.
If it's okay, I'd like to just add a little note to this too, because with you know, great respect to how do we use the money for wayfinding smart.
Mhm.
Like that's a line, but I don't think that precludes us from also talking about how do we contribute to vibrancy. And so, I'm gonna point back to the blueprint, the commercial areas blueprint that we're gonna hopefully get kicked off in 2 weeks here. That we're gonna ask some of those core questions about what is the purpose of our 2 GIDs? What are the community's goals and needs? And how do we check in with the community about the long-term, hopes? So that our funding goes into things like that. So I think there will be a lot more conversation about tactics. With that. Okay. Awesome. Okay.
Well, we were talking about what revenues, I realized I'm completely in the dark about whether case with a pocket park, that's all the construction, is that already funded, is that already in there?
We'll have a pocket park update in September.
There you go.
Okay, so, but we don't need to worry about funding for it for next year right now.
No, I think that'll be a 2027 budget cycle conversation.
Okay. Sounds good.
Do we have any other questions from commissioners on this point? Okay,
Thanks,
anything
Chris,
else?
for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate
Yeah,
you.
no problem. Thank you,
Great.
everyone.
So now we come to the public participation section. I don't see any members of the public online. Do we have any members of the public? I see your hand, Rebecca. I don't see any members of the public online. I don't know if there are any in the room, but before we start that, Rebecca, did you have any other comments?
I have a request from a member of the public who is not here that's come to me
I would
outside
love-
of meeting. The request is, can we add mirrors to the entry and exits from Goose Creek Path to improve visibility around those blind corners of bikes coming in and out? So it is quite a narrow path. Those corners on the western side, that entrance, I believe, is still closed right now due to the construction blocking it. No, it's not. Well, okay. It still can be a tight corner to come around. And then the other one is completely blind, especially if you are coming from underneath the railroad tracks, that underpass there, but also the under the bridge for Junction Place.
Thank you. Any other matters from public that the other commissioners would like to share? And I didn't hear a yes or no on my end of whether or not there were any members of the public in person over there. Okay, thank you so much for letting me know. If that's the only point, do we have any questions from the commission based upon the consent agenda today? I have to apologize because I only see part of the room. So if any of y'all are over here talking, I can't see. So please just verbalize.
Anyone, because there's no one talking. There's no one over here. So you're good.
Fantastic. So 3, 2, 1. Will, would you like to take over for the Boulder Transportation Connections update?
Yes, I would. Quick audio check. Am I coming through to everyone? Very good. I was smiling a lot from Rebecca's comments because I have multiple hats. I live in Boulder Junction. I ride a bike every day. I'm actually teaching a toddler how to ride his bike. Very happy to say that we're using those entrances to Goose Creek Path. So I won't go too into, actually, I won't advocate at all, but I will confirm that as of a few hours ago, that the western entrance to Goose Creek multi-use path is open. There has been tons of construction there. I also have a few different points that I didn't have in my agenda. So just for new updates, Boulder Commons is one of the residential developments. The Gray Star community of businesses also have commercial properties that Daniel might be aware of. From the residential side, I'm happy to say that approximately 80 units are going to be available for leasing I believe, in the next few weeks. So the housing capacity in the district right there at the shared street, 31st and Spruce, Junction Place and Spruce for a map measurement. That's going to be coming online very soon. There's another development that I believe is an acronym or maybe just letters of WYE, I think. And I saw that they've got their leasing sign, a banner sort of vertically on the bricks of the exterior eastern facing wall. I noticed that just a few hours ago, and they've emailed our team at the chamber about EcoPass sort of TDM support, but they didn't yet have their certificate, certificate of occupancy. I believe that must have happened in the last few days. So it's exciting news for that southern segment of the district. Happy to share that. That's probably 100 units or more that'll be coming online within the next few months. I should probably go back to my agenda so I can speak effectively. We love Bike to Work Day. It's one of the really big things we do at Boulder Chamber of Transportation Connections, citywide and regionally. And I'm sorry, I need to pull up my agenda. I've had a lot to navigate outside of work recently. But Bike to Work Day was on June 25th, and it was a huge success. You might be able to reference the packet, so I won't read it to you, but we've grown. I'm saying we because I live in the district and love the district, work in the district. So the Boulder Junction has grown from a few breakfast stations to up to 5. Several of those were just outside the district boundary, but we're joining for the first time. And my colleague Elaine Herb almost has a sense that we've almost peaked at Bike to Work Day because the chamber had over 900 people stop by their station, and that's a record. Denver seemed to have lower than average station participation. Boulder overall had above average station participation. So I'm really happy to see that trend translated directly into the district. On the Bike to Work Day note, I really respect Cassiopeia a lot as a part of the cultural vibrancy and district vitality in action. I think Diana Freeman, who's the owner of Cassiopeia, has had a vision, and it is now really coming to life. So if anyone has not been into the district on a weekend, I strongly recommend a Saturday morning so you can really witness and feel how many people are coming in. Sometimes they're driving with a bike on their car, but a lot of people are utilizing these TDM networks, specifically the multi-use path, but different routes around town to come in and have coffee, have a Belgian waffle, build community, and go utilize our infrastructure safely throughout town. So it's a really beautiful thing. In addition to the breakfast stations that were a big success, we had a happy hour at Zeal, which is within the district on Pearl Parkway and Junction Place. A really good turnout from there. And again, I'm sorry, I've had a lot going on, so I don't want to just read you my notes, but I'll also hold a little bit of time for questions at the end. So the active mobility was really celebrated on what has officially become Walk and Bike to Work Day, both in the morning and in the evening. I'm helping to facilitate a city pilot program that Regan Brown is very involved with, called Boulder Clean Commute, as some of you might know from prior sessions, and Cassiopeia, as well as Logan's and Zeal Restaurant and Curtis Park Deli, who are all district businesses, are participants and sort of leading the charge, so to speak, in the VMT, vehicle miles traveled reduction reward-based incentive, where there's a approximately $5 a day contribution available for employees who track their trips. There were some grant funds provided by the Boulder Chamber, a different department, as well as matching funds from the city of Boulder. So we're seeing that this potential pilot program is really being absorbed and engaged with in an active way here in Boulder Junction. In terms of the TDM benefits, I've started a new count at Chris Jones's request, and I really appreciate his feedback. I hope you're having a great vacation, Chris. So we're over 50 neighborhood eco passes just since our last meeting in May. I've got 52, it's actually 53 as of about an hour ago, and over 20. So I'm seeing 27 business eco passes. Just for a quick context, anyone who lives or works within the boundary of Boulder Junction gets a free RTD Eco Pass, either on their phone through the My Ride app or on a physical card, as well as I would call it a no-cost annual membership to Boulder B-Cycle and a substantial discount to Colorado Car Share. The primary utilization, rather, the primary implementation of those benefits that we see is always through the Eco Pass program. So I'm starting to track this a little bit more closely, and I'll give a special aside to Splunk, which is one of the long-standing businesses in the district, the closest to 34th and Valmont. They seem to be doing very well in their business. I won't get into any of their financials or presumptions, but they've had an intern roster for the last 2 summers, and this year it's robust. There's more than 45 different interns who are primarily remote, but commuting into the district for some seasonal work and career development. And so I've been able to issue and activate over 45 of those, what we're calling a temporary pass issue. But in logistics, it's the same thing as someone who just works in the district. So that takes us to well over 100 eco passes in under 6 weeks, which we're really happy to see. And I will be careful in my wording here because it's not been formally confirmed by RTD in terms of service changes, but we are planning a celebration of the Boulder Junction Depot Square RTD station reopening with an FF4 route, which will serve from the district to Denver's Civic Center station, several stops along Highway 36, but into and out of the underground garage, right? As well as the airport route. And we're not sure how that's going to be presented. It might be AB3, which would, I think, most effectively route along 28th Street to the Table Mesa Park and Ride with a little bit of time shift there for luggage loading and things. And then essentially one more stop until the airport. So guests at the Hyatt, residents and employees of Boulder Junction and the overall community should be able to start utilizing these transportation routes from RTD. I'm choosing my words very carefully here. In early September, the service changes are set to take effect on August 31st. So I would expect that's what's to come. But I've literally been watching the website most days of the week, and there's nothing yet that we're seeing. Most of that hinges on RTD in terms of fulfillment of service schedule, but we are working with the city and some of our transportation partners to plan sort of a small scale celebration that is tentatively, and I'm just going to say this internally for present company, September 3rd. That might change a little bit since it's so close to Labor Day, but we've been advocating for this for years. My work in activating these eco passes is giving us data-driven advocacy where we can propose to RTD service to Union Station, more frequent service to the airport. So that's sort of the tools that we're using in TDM to reactivate not just the RTD station, but the Depot Plaza from a community standpoint and the whole district overall. I see Kevin's here, so I did want to give a little accolade beyond the EcoPass to B-Cycle. I need to go back into Zoom here. So these postcard mailers, which I probably need to turn my background on, they have arrived. So I know this was a long, it was a lot of refinement to get specific residential and business addresses to have this direct postal communication about B-Cycle. And I've had, I think, 4 people now tell me, oh, we were talking about those bikes. I got a postcard. I'm set up now. So I'm actually seeing in the lived experience conversion of folks who are aware of the service, but maybe not ready to do it. Not confident in bike riding, but the season for cycling has arrived, which is every day, but it's nice to have warm weather. So I'm happy to share that there were, and Kevin, if you want to speak to this at all, there were many postcards sent out to almost all residents in the district, and we're starting to see more and more uptake of B-Cycle usage. I feel like I've talked a lot, so I'm going to pause and I'll welcome any Q&A that might be. I see Rebecca.
Well, thanks for adjusting the upcoming service changes for RTD. I did actually check the website again today. It was on my list to ask whether or not we had confirmation of those changes because August is approaching, but you're saying it's August 31st that those would take effect if there are no changes. One other thing on that, I do believe that the airport service from Boulder Junction will remain AB2. If I recall correctly, AB3 is the weekend service, perhaps from downtown, which will be really confusing. But I might have that backwards. So to have weekday AB, weekend AB something, Boulder Junction AB something else, but
Not at liberty nor willing to speak on RTD's route or communications on that. There is an email address, I believe it's service change at rtd-denver, which is a great rtd-denver.com, which is a great way to get individuals. And I really believe personally and professionally, businesses and city staff communicating the lived experience of what you see. If Rebecca is someone who utilizes TDM practices in your daily life, please let them know. And as a quick aside to that, there's been quite a bit of discussion on this meeting so far about the Boulder Junction Depot Square parking garage. And RTD does have some information, which I'm going to link in the chat. They quote 75 parking spaces within the garage that's been in discussion. I would imagine that's going to be something that is getting more attention as the station resumes, because in my personal, or rather as a work project, I've tried to investigate how does a commuter confirm that how does a commuter pay for parking? And from the best that I can tell, the payment kiosk for an RTD rider is within the RTD station, which has been closed. Therefore, I do not believe that commuters have been able to pay for parking since service has been suspended. I don't have exact clarity on that, but I will link right now the details to that garage. And it looks like Robin has a question as well.
Actually just have a request, which is, I take your point, and first of all, I appreciate your ample hedging on not getting our hopes up too much. But I was wondering if you could possibly share that contact and email information as well, both in the chat and in the notes for the meeting. So that commissioners
related to the service change.
so that we can do that offline.
Happy to do that. I think Robin, I actually sent you directly, so everyone should now be able to see the details from RTD for Depot Square station parking.
Thank you.
Great.
Do we have any questions from the commissioners? Thank you, Rebecca.
And there it is, quick on the draw there, Rebecca. Thanks. Appreciate the community support.
Takes a village. So do we have any other questions from the commissioners? Anyone else in the room?
well, I'll take the floor just for one more second. Something that is not RTD but is related. Is there still any movement in bringing the hot bus across 30th?
So I'm going to diligently deflect that one. As some of you, I will assume know, the hot bus is actually operated by Via Mobility, which is one of our transportation partners based in Boulder. They are a route of RTD, so there's an interesting combination in terms of driving capacity and parking access. Frank Bruno is the principal, I believe his title is CEO at this point with Via Mobility, and he could probably provide some details on that. From what I've seen, that's probably not going to be part of these initial service changes, but from a lived experience standpoint, I think that's an excellent target for us to achieve. or at least a goal to strive for, because the fact of winter commuting into downtown and having a warm, clean station to wait for the bus is great. And this is a bi-directional route, so it would go from Boulder Junction towards the CU campus or towards downtown 7 days a week. with
I
such
think
a
I've
convenient
mentioned this
model.
before. There was a study group, a public study group in Boulder about this question back in like 2016 or 2017.
Hmm.
That's how long it's been stalled. During that time, Boulder Junction has definitely built out. There's a lot more residents and businesses there, and that is another way for patrons to come in and visit the district, is if they don't get dumped on the other side of 30th and have to navigate their way across that intersection. So
Yeah, just some of the conjecture that I've gleaned from office conversations is it doesn't seem like that rerouting will take effect this fall. And I fully agree with what Rebecca shared. It's a great way to get folks into the district, and VIA is working to have more and more of their hop fleet electric. So for more utilization and just the experience of what zero emissions travel can be, it's a great combination. But I don't have a formal I'm measuring my words carefully here.
Opening up to additional questions, comments? Hearing none. We have already gone over matters from staff, which was moved earlier. Do we have any matters from commissioners that have not been addressed yet? Rebecca?
but before I take over, does anybody else have their hand raised in the room? Okay. Kevin, I think you brought up a question about the pocket park. One of my questions is going to be related to that, which is, as we look to the future and plan that, do we have any updates on phase 2 at TVAP? I haven't had an update on that for the past several meetings. And then will that include any playgrounds for resident children? Because that is absolutely something that is missing in the district, as well as a shared dog run, right? So someplace that residents can meet and interact with each other, and also, be safe, right? So, we don't even have this grassy knoll that's in the neighborhood that's not grassy right now. So
That's a question we can follow up.
I mean.
thanks, Matt.
Fine, but we will have Parks and Recreation coming, to the September meeting to give an update on the pocket park. Not quite sure what the subject matter will be, but I know that they're coming.
Okay, great. And then, just that follow-up question about whether or not we get an update on TVAP phase 2, and whether or not it will include any community amenities such as park space, things that we expect from other neighborhoods in the neighborhood, in the city, but that Boulder Junction has been very lean on.
We'll get those 2 questions for follow-up.
Other commissioners? Okay, so announcing our next VJAD commissions meeting will be September 7th. Oh, sorry, Matt.
You want to interrupt, but now that you have quorum for TDAP, if you wanted to go back to the.
Oh. Yes, I would. Thank you so much for mentioning that. So we're skipping back to procedural items at the beginning. Do we have an approval for the May 2025 meeting minutes?
I think we may still have a problem with quorum here, right? Because again, I'm one of those members.
Oh, okay.
Oh, same issue with minutes.
Yeah, sorry, that's correct. I was hoping for the vice chair vote.
Oh, okay.
That we can do.
Elections for chair and vice chair of BJAD, TDM. Y'all have a quorum for that. So do we have, who is stepping into the position of chair here?
had not considered that before coming to this meeting.
Sorry, Kevin, I didn't hear that.
I just said, I had not yet considered volunteering myself before coming to this meeting.
Okay.
Currently, Rebecca, you are the chair.
I
Yeah,
am the chair and we have no vice chair.
we have no
And
vice
want
chair.
To keep it that way, we would just need either Daniel or Kevin to volunteer for vice chair. if Kevin is
Mhm.
not involved.
We can keep Rebecca as the chair and volunteer someone else as vice chair.
Rebecca, would that work for you if I volunteered to put myself forward as vice chair?
Yes, would you like to move to to nominate yourself? You can nominate yourself. We can vote on it. Parking's not allowed to. All right. All in favor of Kevin becoming vice chair of BJAT TDM? Aye.
I have to vote there to be even.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations.
It's my second meeting.
Would you like flowers or a song? I can't sing, but
All of the flowers.
I'm gonna get a brand new name tag that says vice chair.
Oh.
ooh, we don't even have those, Robin.
You
We don't
do.
not only do we not have those, I want to point out that I have to spend every time I tell people that I'm on the BJAD Parking Commission, the first thing they ask is if I can fix their tickets. And I'm like, no, pay those tickets. Secondly, that's not what we do. So can we get anything else resolved now that we have Kevin in the room or was that our one and done?
That's it.
First of all, thanks for being my eyes and ears in the room. I appreciate you you pointing out that. Now skipping all the way back down to point 9. I would like to announce our next BJAD Commissions meeting is September 17th, Wednesday at 4 p.m. Please mark your calendars. Rebecca.
I'm so sorry.
Why
I knew we were skipping forward. I just wanted to give Ellie a chance while she's in the room and has people in front of her to pester anybody who has not completed agenda request items for the CV meeting or doodles for availability for October.
Would you like
Any
to
of the other
pester
items.
us away, Ellie?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rebecca. Yeah, so if you haven't filled out the doodle link for the October 7th meeting dates, please go ahead and do that. I am trying to set that up. Yes, Kevin.
I have a huge question on that.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, the thing or the doodle will say time of day, right?
It
Did I miss
should,
that?
it should.
Okay,
Yeah.
what is the time of day?
It depends on the date. One of them is 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then the others are 2 p.m. to 8 p.m.
I think I failed it, right?
I can look.
I think I did.
Oh, that's, you know what, I actually remember seeing 2 8 and I didn't know what those numbers meant. It was either 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. to 8 p.m. Got it. All
I
right,
have your answers, Kevin.
I submitted them anyway. I was like, I
Yeah.
can probably make whatever it is work.
As is usually the
Robin.
case.
I don't, Daniel, sorry.
I didn't fill it out?
No.
Okay, I'll do it.
Thank you.
As is usually the case, I'm probably the problem here, Ellie. This is not your fault, but just so it's top of my email and I cannot avoid it, could you resend it to me?
I do have your responses actually already, so we're good.
Never
Good.
mind. I was totally on top of it. I just assumed based upon lived
Yeah,
experience I wasn't. I know I'm always the last one, like, oh, sorry. And I really appreciate your professionalism and kindness to me when I am constantly late, getting you back what you have asked for in a very timely manner. Is there anything else? And Ellie, do you have anything you want to share additionally to that?
Oh, this.
I guess I was gonna bring it up in September, but we just closed the applications for recruitment for board commissioners, and we did not have any more applications this round. So it's all of y'all and Kevin now, for now.
I know this is never an agenda item and I'm going completely out of order, but I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm chair and leading the meeting to just completely steamroll over the agenda and say that as matters for staff, Is it possible for us to add Ellie in as a point to make sure that their concerns are being taken care of in all these meetings?
Absolutely.
Sure, yeah.
Great. Let's do that. I would love to say like, let's do that going forward. And with that, if we have no other points, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Be well.